Well, let's back up a little bit. It's very clear that under the Municipal Government Act, as well as under the City of Calgary's Code of Conduct bylaw, you actually cannot leak confidential information. Regardless of what it's about or the benefits of getting it out there, you just can't do it. And there are mechanisms by which we can release stuff publicly. And as a matter of fact, in the last council meeting, administration and I committed to release most of the document under discussion publicly after we had taken out a few of the controversial or the not complete issues in it. So that said, the challenge with leaks for political purposes when they're devoid of context is that the document doesn't mean much without the discussion around it. So for example, this particular document was part of the city's due diligence on Calgary 2026's work. And you may have noticed that Calgary 2026 had recommended a number of different options for where the Athletes Village would be. And this document said, look, if this particular option is the chosen one on the bus barns, we think there may be an additional cost for remediation. That's straight up due diligence work. And so at that point, council would say, well, do we choose to go somewhere else then, because there's lots of other options, or do we choose to spend more money on this one? And that's a discussion, frankly, the council would have after we won the bid, a year or two from now, and a discussion that would be held publicly. And so that's kind of the challenge when this stuff gets released devoid of context, because then it looks like, oh, something's being hidden, as opposed to this is just part of the process. That said, setting aside the actual issue here, the real issue is that if a member of council conducts what is essentially an illegal act, then I have no choice as the chair of the council but to investigate that, or to ask for that to be investigated, and that's where we're at.
How do you know that was a member of council?
I don't know that for sure, but I do know that, I know who was in the room when that document was discussed. You all know who was in the room, it's in the minutes. And the vast majority of people in the room are members of council.
In terms of when the bid code comes up, I mean, trust aside for councillors, does that kind of mislead people in the sense of not giving them all the information that might be out there for them to make an informed decision of whether the Olympics...
Well, this is really critical, and I've said from the very beginning that citizens will have all the information they need to make a vote, and sort of misleading, non-contextualized numbers that make it look like, oh, it's going to be much higher than it is, when really all it is a discussion saying, let's make sure they looked at the environmental remediation costs. That is actually, I think, misleads voters, and it's important that people have the full amount of information in front of them.
But after the story appeared, there were councillors, more than one, who talked about the fact that we weren't getting full information. So it wasn't just that the story appeared, it was also the councillors afterwards.
I understand that, and I would suggest that those councillors are those who have been opposed to the bid for a long time. And I would heartily and haughtily disagree with that. In fact, you're getting all, as I said many times, and as independent observers around the world have observed, this is the most transparent bid process any city has ever gotten through. And in fact, citizens are getting so much more information. Ask the citizens of Stockholm or Milan right now what they know about their Olympic bid, and you'll find it's a lot less than what we've got.
Are you willing to go to, you mentioned, you called it a kind of court of appeal to the province. Under what situations could you go to municipal affairs if needed?
Fundamentally, I think we can handle such things on our own. I've been in this office for 9 years. This is almost 9 years. This is probably the second or third consequential leak of information of all that time. City Council really manages their affairs very professionally almost all the time. So I don't see this as being a massive problem that we need to deal with.
How many other examples of Olympics-related expenditures are there? And I'm not talking about an LRT of the airport. You don't need to have an LRT of the airport. But how many other examples are there of related spending?
No, that's really it, I think.
Just the one.
Yeah, because the issue around the Athletes Village for every Olympics is an issue around, so what do you do with it afterwards? And what are the various associated costs that you do with it afterwards? For example, we know that in Vancouver 2010, that was by far the biggest problem they had both before and after the Olympics. So the reason that there's all this due diligence on that is that's really critical. Now look, if the federal or provincial government came back and said, as part of our deal, we actually want to build a line to the airport, for example, or different sorts of venues or facilities, that's again a discussion that we would have very publicly. But for now, I can't think of any other examples.
But if the document really isn't revealing much more than what you just said, why not release it?
Only because, in fact, that particular document, Attachment 8, we had a discussion about it in open session in council 2 weeks ago. And there were a couple of things in there around negotiating strategy with the province and the feds. And that was what I was uncomfortable releasing. In fact, I remember saying to Councillor Farkas at that time that we can probably do a relatively quick redaction of this, get out the negotiating strategy stuff, and release the rest.
So there are no major costs. There are no major costs outside of the bus barns from this Olympic.
Well, I mean, there's lots of major costs.
No, beyond what people
stated beyond what people already
know.
know. Not that I know of. Again, things change. So if, for example, to use Scott's example, people really thought, an extension to transit in the north to the airport is a great idea, then we'd have that discussion. But no, there's nothing that's essential to the bid. This is just due diligence. So the city has to go through every line of BidCo's proposed budget and kind of go, we agree with this, we disagree with this, we agree with this, we disagree with this. And the only one that still has this question on it is that question of where the Athletes Village goes. There's also questions around where curling will go. There needs to be some due diligence on the ski jumping question just to make sure those numbers balance. But this is just all part of the regular process. There's no big smoking gun here, I don't think.
So further to that question, then why not redact the stuff that we really don't want to open domain and the rest of it?
I anticipate that is what we will end up doing.
So why is it taking so long?
I was away last week.
Can I ask
Other
what
topics,
happens to
folks?
this
Yes.
person when you figure out who it is?
There are a number of sanctions in the Municipal Government Act, as well as in the Code of Conduct bylaw that Council passed. They're pretty toothless, to be honest with you. There are some stuff in the Municipal Government Act that isn't. But the real issue here is just showing that, as councillors, we pass bylaws, and it's important for us to uphold the bylaws that we pass. We have to hold ourselves to a high standard.
So obviously,
Given that there had been so much discussion about releasing these documents anyway.
No. It's very, very clear the council passed a motion saying not to do it, and somebody did it.
the results of the investigation will be released.
Yeah, they always are.
So it's the point or the principle.
I mean, I have no choice in the matter. If I find a violation of a council bylaw, then I'm not allowed to turn the other cheek and close my eyes to it. I got to do something. So.
You said the consequences might be toothless. Is that the same case if it was found a city employee or someone other than a councillor?
There are probably more sanctions for a city employee if that is in fact what happened.
Almost $83,000 for the councillors' legal fees and the matter that was found. What are your thoughts about that?
Are you asking about the money being spent or about the fact that you had to file a FOIA for it?
That's my next question, sir.
Okay, I'll start with the first one. I think it's really important that councillors are indemnified against legal action, especially frivolous legal action. I've been through this myself. I think that council did the right thing in putting that forward. That said, this case is also a little bit different, and I'll just remind folks that, in my own case, and every councillor is able to do this, I endeavored to pay the city back, and did in fact pay the city back for those fees. Every councillor has the choice to do that. That said, it is really, really important to protect councillors against frivolous lawsuits. That is a direct affront to democracy of someone who has, the ability to use the courts as a weapon to keep councillors quiet. That the councillors have some protection against that, and to me, that is a sacrosanct principle, and I'm happy the council has abided by it.
So what are your thoughts about the fact that I took the point request to get the answer of how the money was spent?
Look, on this particular issue, it's no surprise that I have long been arguing for release of more information and making it easier for people who want to know the information on that. And in this particular case, had that choice been mine, I would have just coughed up that number.
Should the councillors pay that?
That's up to them. The policy is very clear. They can if they choose to. There is no obligation to do so.
The money wasn't spent particular councillors from lawsuits, right? This was legal advice related to that report that was released.
So
Protecting their names.
it is a bit different. I agree with you on that, but it still falls under that policy.
Can I ask, so just to be clear, you were going to release the documents anyway before they got released secretly?
That particular one, not all of them. So there were, I can't remember the titles of all 4 documents, but they were 8, 9, 10, and 11. 11 is a risk register that has a bunch of confidential information in it, but a public version of that will be revealed to the next Olympic Committee meeting. and 8 is about the due diligence. And that one, the problem with the document is it had a mix of speculative stuff and factual stuff, and it had some negotiating things in it. So some version of that could be released, and certainly I promised Councillor Farkas that we would look at that at the end of the meeting on September 10th. We just have to figure out what that looks like, and frankly, because I've been away, I'm not sure what's been done on that yet. Okay, anyone else? What did I bring you back from China? Maybe a little bit of a virus, 17 hours each way in economy class seat, not much fun. But no, it was a good opportunity. We took just a small number of Calgarians with us. We had some meetings in Beijing with potential investors, and then we were out at the World Economic Forum in Tianjin, where I spent some time with some Chinese mayors and mayors from around the world talking about urban issues. For example, I'll give you a fun one. I moderated a discussion on new construction materials and 3D printing and bringing down infrastructure costs for cities, which is very cool. And so there was a bunch of knowledge sharing, but really it was about talking to people who may have opportunity to invest in the city, who may have opportunity to learn a little bit more about Calgary. And, every chance I got, I reminded folks that Calgary was named the most livable city in North America this summer. So in that way, productive. Those long economy class flights, not so much fun.